The Heavenly Demon. Can't Live a Normal Life. By Sanchin. Chapter 461. New Days. Part 5. They moved to a different location. As they walked through the garden, Kevin asked cautiously, "My lord, may I ask you a question?" "Speak." 3 years ago, my lord, you defeated the Demon King, achieving a historic feat everyone thought impossible. No one dares challenge your authority now. Everything you've accomplished proves your standing, and the annual tournament shows that your past achievements weren't just exaggerated legends. So why do you push yourself so hard? Even those beneath you are relaxing in this era of peace, so why do you still live with the same intensity you did 3 years ago? Kevin knew just by looking at Roman Dmitri. The intense fire in his eyes, his face drenched in sweat, a level of training whose depth was impossible to fathom. He had gotten even stronger. Roman, who Kevin had already considered untouchable 3 years ago, was forging a new level of mastery through relentless training. Kevin couldn't wrap his head around it. It wasn't that he didn't know the type of man Roman was, but these were incredibly peaceful times. Even if he didn't push himself so hard, the Dmitri Empire would continue to enjoy absolute power, at least while Roman was alive. So why? Why continue this struggle when there were no enemies left to fight? Seeing that Kevin's question was sincere, Roman Dmitri stopped walking and looked out at the garden. As you say, there's no longer a reason for me to push myself so hard. But Kevin, that is not the way of a leader. He understood Kevin. In his past life, the people who followed him had reacted the same way. Even after he had conquered the Murim, they had watched him engross himself in daily training and had asked why. The people may enjoy peace. Their role is to hope for their own future and their family's well-being, rather than worry about the nation's security. But if their leader also grows complacent in times of peace, an unexpected disaster could eventually threaten us all. Just a few years ago, did people predict the existence of the Demon King? Did they know that I, someone from the remote Dmitri family, would become the emperor? No. Just as our lives have never gone exactly as expected, no one can say for certain what dangers may lie ahead. While the presence of the divine demon dominated the Murim, it was an era of peace and prosperity. Faced with his ever-growing power, people didn't dare attempt rebellion. You must prepare for danger before it appears to remain unshaken. That's why I remain faithful to my role. So that I do not claim ignorance when danger strikes the world, so that I can take responsibility for the lives lost under my command. I cannot abide by even the slightest bit of complacency. In truth, the people of Murim had had no reason to rebel. The dictatorship of Genghis Bek was practically a utopia. The potential drawbacks of dictatorship didn't cause major problems, at least not under Genghis Bek's rule. As long as no one broke the law, he did not interfere in their lives. He respected their right to self-determination and let them do whatever they wanted within reason. That was why, on the day he died in his past life, the entirety of Murim, regardless of faction, was steeped in immense sorrow. I am someone who must live this way. Settling into an ordinary life, building an ordinary family, that is not permitted for me. From the bottom rungs of life, from the moment he chose to fight just to survive, peace had ceased to exist in the divine demon's life. He started walking ahead again. Kevin, watching his retreated figure, couldn't say a word. Now he could see it. The burden borne by the absolute ruler, Roman Dmitri. Kevin returned home. It felt empty. He collapsed onto the bed in the bare room, as empty as the hole in his chest. What am I living for? Years ago, when he first met Roman Dmitri, Kevin had yearned to live an ordinary life, just like everyone else. That was why he had risked his life. He'd even gritted his teeth and cut off his own arm. That was how much he envied the lives of the common people he'd seen outside the slums. And now that he had achieved everything he wanted, absurdly, Kevin felt lost. He had definitely wanted this, but Kevin felt no desire to do anything with it. Until a few days ago, he hadn't known why. But after seeing Emperor Roman, Kevin understood his true feelings. I can't be an ordinary person anymore. In a life defined by scarcity, he had lived every day with an unsatisfied sense of yearning. From the moment he finally started living a decent life, his fixation on Roman Dmitri morphed into a sense of inferiority toward his rivals. It was an unusual sentiment, he knew. While most people found happiness in an ordinary life, Kevin had placed his sense of worth elsewhere. But they were now in an era of peace. Roman Dmitri wasn't in danger, and Kevin, who only knew how to fight, was unnecessary. And so, he had grown idle. Kevin felt like he was withering away with every peaceful day. Losing his sense of purpose, he began spending more time alone. A little while ago, he had asked around about Chris's recent activities. Despite winning the ranking tournament every year only to be brutally defeated by Roman, Chris was still fired up, preparing for the next tournament. His goal was to become the best on the continent. Even knowing his opponent was the seemingly unbeatable Roman Dmitri, he pursued his goal, unshaken. My lord is right. Not everyone can live an ordinary life. Marie was fortunate not to miss her chance at normalcy, but the sight of that seemingly happy couple isn't the life I want. Creak. He pushed himself up. The world didn't need the devil of Dmitri anymore. The figure once revered had become feared. But Kevin didn't care about that. I will also become stronger. If anyone threatens Dmitri in the distant future, I'll be powerful enough that they won't be able to do a thing. That is my purpose. For the one who granted me a decent life, even if peace lasts until the moment I die, I will accept death with a smile, knowing I lived for you. The one man who had filled his barren life. To him, Roman Dmitri was a god, his very reason for living. Kevin immediately picked up his sword and headed to the training grounds. Up to this point, Chris had always defeated him. But he wouldn't remain a loser forever. At that moment, in the meeting room of a luxurious mansion, a group of people were deep in serious discussion. This is already the fourth attempt. Frankly, I think persuading him is impossible. We didn't call this meeting to write things off as impossible. We need a better approach, a solid one. The atmosphere was tense. Seeing the hardened expression of the person seated at the head of the table, the others cautiously threw out suggestions. First, the target possesses both wealth and honor. Until now, we've offered conditions any ordinary person would salivate over, but I believe we need a different approach. How about using feminine charm? Gather beautiful women from across the continent, sway his heart, and we might turn this situation around. Right, that sounds promising. No matter how much someone has, matters of the heart are a different issue. I disagree. He has clearly shown a distinct vision. Do you think someone like that would be swayed by mere beauty? More importantly, he's not the type to fall for such tactics. Plenty of women already express affection for him due to his looks. He won't accept anything from us if we demand something in return. Then, how about targeting his master? I hear they have a very close relationship. If we provoke him in that way, we won't be able to handle the consequences. The mood in the meeting room grew heated. Over the past year, they had tried to negotiate whenever an opportunity arose, but each of their attempts failed due to the other party's firm refusal. The problem was, there seemed to be no other options. Since he was at least willing to talk, they couldn't bring themselves to give up despite repeated failures. This was the will of their leader. Until he gave the word to stop, those serving him had to keep trying to find a solution. One man spoke up. Realistically, if he has refused all of our conditions so far, persuading him with any offer is likely impossible. How about showing our sincerity instead? I desire this so desperately. Name your price, whatever you want. For the sake of compromise, I would give even a fortune. If we convey that to him, perhaps our genuine plea will open the way for a more productive negotiation. Also, the impact of certain words depends greatly on who speaks them. Our Lord leads Valentino, the greatest merchant guild on the continent. If Marquis Valentino makes a firm decision, a path will surely open. The person at the head of the table was indeed Valentino. Listening intently to his people, he looked around and spoke in a serious voice. As you know, the sword Chris currently possesses is something I desperately desire, the first nameless blade. The symbolism of those weapons are immense. Chris and Kevin, both hailed as the future of Dimitri, competed over that single sword, and Chris's victory decided its owner. A sword with such a rich history is an incredible treasure to a collector like me. And now that Emperor Roman Dimitri is no longer producing new swords, I must have it. He revealed his deepest desire. Marquis Valentino had dedicated himself entirely to his work up to this point. He had frantically expanded both his business and his influence, finally achieving his dream of leading the continent's top merchant guild. For the past year, people had regarded Valentino Guild as the best. Remembering Valentino Guild's devotion during the conquest of the Devil Dom, they had risen to the top spot in just 2 years on that foundation. Preparations were complete. Believing he could now achieve anything, he had met with Chris, only to be rejected all 3 times. I have waited for this moment, the Marquis declared. People say I have everything, but my purpose lies in acquiring items of tangible value. So I will choose to face him head-on. Instead of simply making an offer within limits I can afford, if I show I'm willing to give my all, even Chris won't be able to refuse outright. Don't worry. Even if I lose much in this deal, Valentino will remain at the top. We obey your command. We obey your command. No one objected. This was his realm, and everyone present knew that Valentino's ambition was the driving force behind his status as the world's best. Therefore, even Chris would have trouble refusing him this time. The next day, Marquis Valentino went to find Chris himself. He blocked Chris's path as he was returning from training and said with a resolute expression, "Chris, I have made 3 offers so far, and you haven't shown any willingness to compromise. I understand. I know that a sword bestowed by Emperor Roman Dimitri cannot be replaced by anything. But sometimes, there comes a moment when one must relinquish even the most precious things." Marquis Valentino, Chris sighed. Perhaps the official count was 3 times, but Marquis Valentino had relentlessly coveted his sword. He understood, to an extent. Knowing Marquis Valentino's nature, his intense obsession wasn't entirely incomprehensible. But Chris couldn't accept the request. The first nameless blade was unique and utterly irreplaceable. Furthermore, he didn't like the fact that the Marquis came to him instead of badgering Kevin. He opened his mouth to refuse again, intending to draw a clear line this time. But Marquis Valentino spoke first. "Russell. Please take this." He handed something over. It was a blank sheet of paper. As Chris stared down at the empty page, a shockingly audacious offer reached his ears. "It's a blank page. Write down everything your heart desires, Chris, fill it with thousands of words. If you do so, I will stake the name of the Valentino family and deliver to you everything listed there. The condition, as you know, is just one thing." His gaze flicked to Chris's waist, the sword hanging there. The moment he confirmed it was the first nameless blade, Marquis Valentino's eyes filled with avarice. "Give that sword to me, and I will give you anything in the world. Valentino has the power to make it happen." Chapter 462. New Days. Part 6. It was a ridiculous proposal. Had the offer, essentially a blank check, come from anyone other than Marquis Valentino, Chris wouldn't have given it a second thought. He's probably serious. Several months ago, there was an incident involving Marquis Valentino. He had coveted a particular piece of art, but its owner had adamantly refused to sell, insisting it was a cherished keepsake from their father. This wasn't a negotiation tactic, the owner was known far and wide for their stubbornness. It seemed that even the resourceful Marquis Valentino would be forced to admit defeat for once. Yet, a few days later, Marquis Valentino successfully closed the deal. It turned out the owner had harbored a far-fetched dream of possessing a private island. The Marquis, incredibly, purchased an uninhabited island in Odelia and presented it to him, complete with a villa suitable for lifelong residence. The owner was completely swayed, people talked for days about the sheer radiance of his smile that day. That was Valentino. Known as the avaricious collector, he now regarded Chris with that hungry look in his eye. Chris responded, "I fully understand your desire, Marquis Valentino. And while I recognize this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I cannot accept it, regardless of what more you might offer. It isn't merely the symbolic value of this sword being a gift from His Majesty, Emperor Roman. Based on its performance alone, I doubt I could ever find a superior weapon in my lifetime. I concede that point. However, I will find you a suitable alternative. No mere alternative will do. If your investigation into me was thorough, then you understand what my goal is." Every year, Chris participated in the ranking tournament and defeated the challengers vying for his position, all while pursuing the seemingly impossible goal of surpassing Roman Dmitri. Each experience had cemented one thing in his mind: with him already lacking so much in skill, he'd stand no chance of victory with an inferior sword. Unlike Kevin, whose loyalty prevented him from selling anything gifted to him by Roman Dmitri, Chris's refusal to do so was purely practical. Therefore, regardless of whatever Marquis Valentino offered, Chris hadn't entertained the thought of taking this deal for even a moment. When the opponents are closely matched in skill, the slightest edge can determine the outcome of a battle. Should such a moment ever arise, I would forever regret selling this sword. I appreciate your desire for it, Marquis Valentino. If circumstances ever force me to sell it, rest assured, you will be the first person I consider. Do you truly expect such a moment will ever come? Life is unpredictable. Should I manage to defeat His Majesty the Emperor and gain recognition as the continent's strongest blade, perhaps then I won't be so reliant on this sword's performance anymore." At this, Marquis Valentino's expression twisted. While Chris framed it as a remote possibility, the entire world knew it was nothing more than a pipe dream. "Really, Sir Chris, I took you for a sensible man. There's no need for such excuses. If you don't wish to sell, simply say so. Why resort to such impossible hypotheticals?" It required no complex thought. The future Chris described, his dream, would never materialize. The argument eventually subsided. Right up until their parting, Marquis Valentino remained stubbornly persistent. "Sir Chris, life always has its hardships. When exhaustion makes you pause for breath, when you fall and feel unable to rise again, turn your gaze toward me. I shall always be by your side. Should you extend your hand to me, I will eagerly grasp it and guide you toward the correct path. Remember this, I will always be there, no matter what." Of course, the sole price for this unwavering devotion is the first unnamed blade. He was certainly a force of nature. As Chris walked away, he mused that perhaps it was precisely this fanaticism that had propelled the Marquis to become the wealthiest man on the continent. And indeed, that was the truth. Had he not laid eyes on Roman Dimitri's sword, which ignited his passion as a collector, Marquis Valentino might have lived out his days confined to Cairo's borders. Chris changed direction, heading toward his office. His morning training concluded, it was time to address the administrative tasks awaiting his attention. Relations between Valhalla and Hector have grown worryingly tense. It appears their old animosity lingers. As Hector continues to expand its influence as a magical kingdom, friction with the Valhalla Empire is unavoidable. This was a delicate matter. Chris and Kevin commanded independent units, while Fernando and the Royal Guard were tasked with protecting the Imperial Palace. Chris and Kevin operated solely under Roman Dimitri's direct orders, Chris handling external affairs, Kevin managing covert operations. Since the Valhalla Hector situation fell within Chris's purview, he knew he needed to prepare for any eventuality. His concerns proved timely. He had barely settled into his office and begun reviewing documents when a soldier rushed in with urgent news. "Sir Chris, there's a problem. It seems Hector and Valhalla are on the brink of conflict." Tap. He set down his pen. Leaning back in his chair, Chris's expression turned icy. "Is that so?" The world was enjoying an era of peace. But struggles over power and interests existed regardless of peace. The conflict between the two nations originated from a single incident. A few days prior, Count Khazri, who ran a merchant group in Valhalla, was negotiating with Baron Stuart, a nobleman from Hector. Initially, everything proceeded smoothly. However, right before the deal was finalized, Baron Stuart accepted a better offer from another party, causing the situation to deteriorate rapidly. This was hardly unusual, such events were commonplace in commerce. Yet, Count Khazri reacted with exceptional fury to the perceived slight. How dare a mere baron disrespect me like this? The nobles of Valhalla were citizens of an empire. Though diminished by their defeat at the hands of Dmitri, their imperial pride remained. Hector had struck a nerve. While the issue could have easily been dismissed as a one-off, Count Khazri took it as a personal insult, believing he was being slighted solely because of Valhalla's decline. His reaction stemmed from an inferiority complex. As Valhalla's characteristic belligerence flared, violence seemed the only outlet for his anger. He ordered an attack on Baron Stuart's carriage, disrupting his business. When Stuart protested, demanding to know the meaning of this outrage, Khazri slapped him across the face. Fortunately, no lives were lost. 3 or 4 years ago, the incident might have ended there. But King Edwin Hector, the current ruler of Hector, was enraged upon receiving the report. This incident is unequivocally Valhalla's fault. Unless Valhalla offers a direct apology, I, as the king of Hector, will not stand idly by. This brought the situation to its current state. With Hector's king personally involved, Count Khazri suddenly found himself in a precarious position. Summoned immediately to Valhalla's central government, he anticipated a severe reprimand. Instead, the Emperor of Valhalla offered unexpected counsel. Hold your ground. Your Majesty? I disagree. He has clearly shown a distinct vision. Do you think someone like that would be swayed by mere beauty? More importantly, he's not the type to fall for such tactics. Plenty of women already express affection for him due to his looks. He won't accept anything from us if we demand something in return. Then, how about targeting his master? I hear they have a very close relationship. If we provoke him in that way, we won't be able to handle the consequences. The mood in the meeting room grew heated. Over the past year, they had tried to negotiate whenever an opportunity arose, but each of their attempts failed due to the other party's firm refusal. The problem was, there seemed to be no other options. Since he was at least willing to talk, they couldn't bring themselves to give up despite repeated failures. This was the will of their leader. Until he gave the word to stop, those serving him had to keep trying to find a solution. One man spoke up. Realistically, if he has refused all of our conditions so far, persuading him with any offer is likely impossible. How about showing our sincerity instead? I desire this so desperately. Name your price, whatever you want. For the sake of compromise, I would give even a fortune. If we convey that to him, perhaps our genuine plea will open the way for a more productive negotiation. Also, the impact of certain words depends greatly on who speaks them. Our Lord leads Valentino, the greatest merchant guild on the continent. If Marquis Valentino makes a firm decision, a path will surely open. The person at the head of the table was indeed Valentino. Listening intently to his people, he looked around and spoke in a serious voice. As you know, the sword Chris currently possesses is something I desperately desire, the first nameless blade. The symbolism of those weapons are immense. Chris and Kevin, both hailed as the future of Dmitri, competed over that single sword, and Chris's victory decided its owner. A sword with such a rich history is an incredible treasure to a collector like me. And now that Emperor Roman Dmitri is no longer producing new swords, I must have it. He revealed his deepest desire. Marquis Valentino had dedicated himself entirely to his work up to this point. He had frantically expanded both his business and his influence, finally achieving his dream of leading the continent's top merchant guild. For the past year, people had regarded Valentino Guild as the best. Remembering Valentino Guild's devotion during the conquest of the Devil Dom, they had risen to the top spot in just 2 years on that foundation. Preparations were complete. Believing he could now achieve anything, he had met with Chris, only to be rejected all 3 times. I have waited for this moment, the Marquis declared. People say I have everything, but my purpose lies in acquiring items of tangible value. So I will choose to face him head-on. Instead of simply making an offer within limits I can afford, if I show I'm willing to give my all, even Chris won't be able to refuse outright. Don't worry. Even if I lose much in this deal, Valentino will remain at the top. We obey your command. We obey your command. No one objected. This was his realm, and everyone present knew that Valentino's ambition was the driving force behind his status as the world's best. Therefore, even Chris would have trouble refusing him this time. The next day, Marquis Valentino went to find Chris himself. He blocked Chris's path as he was returning from training and said with a resolute expression, "Chris, I have made 3 offers so far, and you haven't shown any willingness to compromise. I understand. I know that a sword bestowed by Emperor Roman Dmitri cannot be replaced by anything. But sometimes, there comes a moment when one must relinquish even the most precious things." Marquis Valentino, Chris sighed. Perhaps the official count was 3 times, but Marquis Valentino had relentlessly coveted his sword. He understood, to an extent. Knowing Marquis Valentino's nature, his intense obsession wasn't entirely incomprehensible. But Chris couldn't accept the request. The first nameless blade was unique and utterly irreplaceable. Furthermore, he didn't like the fact that the Marquis came to him instead of badgering Kevin. He opened his mouth to refuse again, intending to draw a clear line this time. But Marquis Valentino spoke first. "Russell. Please take this." He handed something over. It was a blank sheet of paper. As Chris stared down at the empty page, a shockingly audacious offer reached his ears. "It's a blank page. Write down everything your heart desires, Chris, fill it with thousands of words. If you do so, I will stake the name of the Valentino family and deliver to you everything listed there. The condition, as you know, is just one thing." His gaze flicked to Chris's waist, the sword hanging there. The moment he confirmed it was the first nameless blade, Marquis Valentino's eyes filled with avarice. "Give that sword to me, and I will give you anything in the world. Valentino has the power to make it happen." This matter should not have escalated into an international dispute. Why, then, do you suppose Edwin Hector is deliberately magnifying it by involving himself? He requires justification. A plausible justification to provoke direct conflict with Valhalla and elevate Hector's standing, whatever the cost. Lately, Valhalla and Hector had been finding fault with each other constantly. No single dispute had been major, but problems arose as Hector, growing in power as a magical kingdom, ceased treating Valhalla with its former deference. It was a period of mutual probing, of testing the waters. If Valhalla yielded now, the empire, already perceived as weak, risked being completely overshadowed by Hector. Count Khazri and Baron Stuart were merely pawns in a larger game. When Hector leveraged the incident with Baron Stuart to raise the stakes, Valhalla's emperor responded by declaring his own refusal to yield. In this world governed by Dmitri, the nation closest to its side is destined for prosperity. Cairo and Hector gained advantageous positions during the Continental Wars, but their status isn't immutable. Valhalla must demonstrate its imperial strength and claim its rightful place beside Dmitri. His voice resonated with conviction. He had no desire to oppose Dmitri, but neither did he intend to relinquish power or influence. "I shall proceed as commanded." Count Khazri grinned. With Valhalla's backing, the situation couldn't be better for him. His relief, however, was fleeting. As Valhalla made no official move to resolve the dispute, Hector requested communication via magic telegram within days. Across the shimmering communication screen, Edwin Hector materialized. Having formally ascended the throne, he regarded Valhalla's assembled leadership with a frosty gaze. There is no custom anywhere in the world that justifies attacking someone simply because a deal fell through. The matter is straightforward. Count Khazri committed wrongdoing, and we require an apology. If you maintain your current stance despite the obvious truth, Hector will have no choice but to question your underlying motives. He directly accused them. The atmosphere turned frigid. In response to Edwin Hector's challenge, the Emperor of Valhalla, seated on his throne, spoke. King Hector, this began as a personal affair. Had Baron Stuart sought an apology from Count Khazri privately, we would have facilitated an amicable resolution. However, Hector's direct intervention has made that impossible. Even if Count Khazri erred, Hector is culpable for escalating this into a conflict between our nations. In other words, are you saying that you refuse to apologize? That is correct. Valhalla labors under a delusion. Empire versus kingdom, while I observe most formalities, such distinctions, save for the Dmitri Empire itself, have lost their significance. Yet, your refusal to address this issue simply because Valhalla cannot bear to admit fault shows disrespect toward us. Emperor of Valhalla, do you truly deem this course of action wise? A line had been crossed. Even with Hector's justification, national pride was now at stake. Do not press this further. Very well. Edwin Hector's expression became glacial. Negotiations had irrevocably broken down. I trust you will not regret this choice. Click. The connection severed abruptly. Left staring at the dark screen, Valhalla's leaders were momentarily stunned into silence. Was this truly the correct response? One of the officials ventured, breaking the silence. Edwin Hector's parting words lingered, sowing unease. Known as the Hope of Hector, he wasn't one to suffer an insult quietly. As all eyes turned to him, Emperor Valhalla met their gazes steadily. Valhalla is currently in decline. We suffered a defeat in the Second Continental War. We swore allegiance to Emperor Roman Dmitri, acting according to our principles. This is the Valhalla we have built. We stand here now to reclaim our former glory, to rekindle the true spirit of Valhalla. His demeanor shifted, radiating the authority he had earned since rising from the ranks of nobility to emperor. Whatever unfolds, uphold our dignity as an empire. Conduct yourselves as warriors. To defend our status, there will be times when we must do things we find distasteful. Everyone in the room understood the unspoken truth. The fault for this incident lay with Count Khazri. Yet, neither Hector nor Valhalla was interested in solving the incident that had sparked this whole affair. It was a clash of interests. Hector had thrown down the gauntlet, and Valhalla had merely refused to retreat. Just then, burst. Your Majesty! There is a critical situation. A knight flung the door open, his face pale with alarm. All eyes immediately turned to him. Reports confirm Hector's forces have crossed Valhalla's borders. This confirmed everything. The fact that they crossed the border the moment negotiations soured proved it. Edwin Hector had no intention of smoothing over relations with Valhalla from the start. Chapter 463. New Days. Part 7. Immediately after the magic telegram connection fizzled out, Bertler, the captain of Hector's royal guard, gave his liege a worried look. Are you truly planning to cross the border? If Valhalla refuses to back down, an issue that could have been resolved peacefully might escalate into war. At that point, regardless of whether we win or lose, Hector will face significant losses. I agree with Captain Bertler. This will not end without bloodshed. They had already discussed this. But with war now imminent, Hector's leaders sought to once again confirm that this is what their king wanted. I also wished for this matter to be resolved peacefully, said Edwin Hector. Some might dismiss this incident as trivial, but that very thought shows how Hector is currently perceived by the rest of the world. If we possessed the same power and authority as Dmitri, would Count Khazri have so much as entertained the thought of seeking revenge on one of our people through violence? This is a clear slight against us. Convinced that there would be no consequences for harming a citizen of Hector, he did as he pleased without thinking of the repercussions. The world has changed. In the past, we had to grin and bear it, but the Hector of today has the strength to hold its ground. Hector's history is one tainted with defeat. Back when we were powerful, we knelt before Valhalla. When we were ridiculed as weak, we couldn't hope to stand up to Kronos' schemes. But things are different now. Reborn as a kingdom of magic, Hector will not repeat the mistakes of the past. Baron Stuart's case speaks to the challenges we are now reckoning with. If even a nobleman like him faces such injustice, how much must Hector's common people be enduring? That's why I believe it's necessary for us to set a clear precedent, one that shows the world what happens when you provoke Hector, one that will ensure no one dares to underestimate us again. Fighting alongside Roman Dmitri during the Second Continental War had taught Edwin the importance of setting a precedent. Hector was now in a state of flux. At this critical juncture, where the decisions he made today could shape their entire future, Edwin judged that Hector needed a stage on which to showcase its strength. Valhalla was the perfect opponent. Still thinking of themselves as an empire, they remained arrogant at every turn. Defeating them would allow Hector to acquire the prestige of an empire. Of course, there would be sacrifices along the way. But Edwin knew well that maintaining peace often required demonstrating that you had the strength to defend it. If war breaks out, many will die. But let me ask you this, do you think we will lose this war? No, we do not. Exactly. We know Hector has grown stronger. To assert our sovereignty, we must show the world just how powerful we've become. The best way to ensure peace is not through peaceful solutions, but by having the strength to defend ourselves. Just as peace came when the Dmitri Empire brought Salamander under its heel, proving our strength will ensure that the people of Hector no longer suffer. As the world changes around us, this is a trial we must undertake at least once. A fierce determination underscored his every word. The force of Edwin Hector's personality seemed to dominate the room, overwhelming his advisors. Hector's star was not destined to remain the king of a small nation. He hoped that when he eventually stepped down from the throne, Hector would be recognized as one of the world's great powers. Just as he had attacked Cairo for Hector's sake, Edwin would always prioritize his nation's interests above all else. If Valhalla backs down, we will have set a precedent and established our foothold as a major power. But if they do not yield, we are ready to go to war and fight Valhalla for the sake of our future. Their hearts aligned. Captivated by their king's zeal, the advisors raised their voices as if by prior agreement. We shall follow your command, your majesty. We shall follow your command, your majesty. We shall follow your command, your majesty. In that moment, Hector became one. And hundreds of miles away, at the command of their king and his advisors, Hector's army crossed Valhalla's borders. Hector's decision threw Valhalla into turmoil. Upon receiving word of their bold advance, one of Valhalla's advisors spoke up, voice shaking. If war truly breaks out, it will be disastrous for us. The Hector of today is not the Hector of the past. Ever since King Edwin Hector gained notoriety as an archmage, countless mages, including those from the Heavenly Magic Tower, have been flocking to Hector. They are now called the Kingdom of Magic. There's no guarantee Valhalla will come out of a war against such a magically powerful opponent victorious. That's right, another agreed. Furthermore, Edwin Hector is skilled in warfare and distinguished himself in the Continental War. If he leads the war effort, there's no telling what might happen. Everyone trembled with anxiety. Valhalla was still nominally called an empire, but things weren't like they used to be. Although they were still a nation in possession of significant power, they could no longer bring Hector to heel as they could in the days when they were considered one of the continent's two superpowers. All eyes turned to the throne. This decision rested with their emperor. They were confident that he, who had consistently proven able to navigate even the most chaotic situations with wisdom and insight, would be able to tell them the right course of action. Emperor Valhalla spoke. We've been left with no choice. Even if victory isn't guaranteed, retreating is not an option. Your Majesty. History repeats itself. How do you think we became an empire? Once, Valhalla was merely a kingdom confined to the southern jungles, but by defeating Hector, then a dominant force, we laid the foundation for our rise as an empire. This situation echoes that one. If Valhalla shows even the slightest hint of weakness against Hector, the same thing will happen, but in reverse, they will lay claim to our prestige just as we claimed Hector's. That is why I rejected his demand for an apology from Baron Stuart. Each side had its own interests at stake. Hector acted for Hector's benefit, and Valhalla acted for Valhalla's. In pursuit of their respective goals, they both made the decisions they deemed necessary. Just as Edwin Hector had chosen to cross the border, Emperor Valhalla also had to consider what was best for Valhalla's future. We all know war is not optimal, the Emperor continued. But it is precisely because we do not desire war that Hector is pushing Valhalla into a corner. If they thought we were in a position to handle anything they threw at us, Hector would never have dared to cross Valhalla's borders in the first place. Therefore, we cannot back down. From this moment on, we will prepare for war with Hector and prove to the world that Valhalla remains strong. Their spirits ignited. If their opponent was going to be so obvious about their intentions, then they would respond in kind. The Emperor of Valhalla, too, was a man who had only reached his position after facing countless hardships. Believe me, Valhalla is not finished yet. That was the moment 3 years of peace were shattered by war. On Valhalla's front lines, Count Anelka, commander of the border guard, looked forward. Seeing Hector's flags fluttering in the distance, his expression grew grim. Seems like war is unavoidable now. A short while ago, orders had come down from up high. Although he had hoped to avoid war if possible, Valhalla had already made its decision. Launch a preemptive strike the moment Hector enters firing range. Hector has already crossed an irreversible line with Valhalla, and we shall prove our imperial might with a decisive response. Swish. Count Anelka raised his hand. At his signal, the mages simultaneously readied their spells. They stood at the brink of chaos. As ordered by his superiors, he would attack the moment the enemy entered range, and from that point forward, all hope of reconciliation would die. It would be a war that would only end when one side finally admitted defeat. The past 3 years had been truly peaceful, but in order to secure their respective interests, Valhalla and Hector were willing to shatter that peace. Valhalla's soldiers couldn't hide their nerves. It was then, just as Hector finally entered firing range and Count Anelka was about to give the order, that a voice stopped him. All troops, Ada. Commander. You must call off the attack. The interrupted Count Anelka whirled around to face a soldier, who skidded to a stop in front of him and doubled over, panting for breath. An order has come down from the Dmitri Empire. Dmitri commands that Valhalla and Hector immediately cease hostilities and attend an international parley. Dmitri. At that name alone, Count Anelka had no choice but to abandon their plan of attack. A negotiation table was prepared in Dmitri. Once Emperor Valhalla and King Edwin Hector were seated at it, Chris, who was presiding over the meeting, began. I understand the situation. So, what do each of your nations truly want? Chris had been entrusted with the Emperor's full authority in dealings such as these. As he could be considered a proxy for Roman Dmitri, Edwin Hector addressed him with the respect that role merited. This is a simple matter. Count Khazri committed a grave offense. If Valhalla acknowledges that and offers a sincere apology, Hector will not escalate this matter any further. King Hector, the Emperor countered, that attitude of yours is precisely the problem. It isn't that Valhalla is simply trying to deny responsibility here. The issue is that Hector has dragged a personal conflict into the national domain. With such obvious ulterior motives, how can we possibly accept Hector's demands? I could say the same. With the perpetrator refusing to admit fault, what reason we have to resolve things with Valhalla peacefully? The animosity between them intensified. Surveying the exchange, Chris could read between the lines of their dynamic. He could see exactly why things had escalated to this point. Neither side wants to yield a single inch. Now that this mess has been brought to their attention, neither nation can back down without losing face. Doing so would be tantamount to admitting their own weakness. He'd easily grasped their motivations. The real challenge lay in actually resolving the issue. It is the policy of Emperor Roman Dmitri not to intervene in any matter as long as the laws he has established are not violated, said Chris. This case is no different. If war had broken out after this issue had gone through the proper channels, Dmitri would have stayed out of the conflict between your two nations. His gaze sharpened. So why do you think I arranged this meeting? Edwin Hector knew things might turn out this way. If he had followed the proper procedures, this conflict certainly wouldn't have led directly to war. The dispute between Count Khazri and Baron Stuart was actually quite minor, and the ruling likely would have been fair and favorable for Hector. Edwin, aware of this, had deliberately rushed to pour fuel on the fire. He felt that only by doing so could he show Hector's might. If Dmitri hadn't intervened, Hector would have seen this through to the end. If an issue is serious enough to warrant war, it must first be brought before Dmitri for judgment. If the problem cannot be resolved even then, war may commence. That is the law of this land. We do not interfere in personal matters, but guidelines have been established for international relations, as certain guardrails are necessary to ensure that things proceed smoothly. While this mandate is largely informal and has never been enforced before, no nation has ever acted against it. The peace of the last 3 years was built upon this foundation. He looked directly at Edwin Hector. He was a remarkable man, undoubtedly a future hero destined to lead the next generation, but he, too, fell under Dmitri's sphere of influence. Therefore, Chris had no intention of playing along with his political games. Answer me, both of you. Do you intend to break the law of the Dmitri Empire? The words carried with them all of the gravity and ferocity of Dmitri's second-in-command. The men sitting opposite him were the rulers of nations, yet Chris was now in a completely different position than he had been 3 years prior, a position capable of intimidating even them. Chapter 464. New Days. Part 8. The dispute was settled quickly after that. The moment Chris invoked the authority of Dmitri, both Hector and Valhalla immediately backed down as if they hadn't been at each other's throats at all. On behalf of Valhalla, I apologize for Count Khazri's egregious actions. Upon his return to Valhalla, he will face punishment according to due process, and we will ensure such an incident never occurs again. I, too, apologize for my disrespect. Provided you handle it thus, I shall not pursue this matter further. Furthermore, should any issues arise between our nations in the future, I shall be more mindful of Valhalla's position. It was a remarkably swift resolution, perhaps the most ideal outcome possible under the circumstances. With Dmitri providing them justification for accepting the terms, Valhalla was able to save face without having to resort to war. While they did end up having to apologize for Count Khazri's actions, Dmitri's intervention meant that settling the matter this way was the best possible scenario for Valhalla, who had braced themselves for a fight. Hector found itself in a similar position. Having already demonstrated Hector's resolve to the world, concluding the affair now cost them nothing. This success was a testament to Chris's diplomatic skill. He cleverly leveraged Dmitri's standing, warning both nations that any conflict between them must adhere to the laws established by Dmitri. His response was also remarkably swift. Had he not been closely monitoring relations between Hector and Valhalla, the situation could easily have escalated beyond control before he could intervene. Roman Dmitri permitted competition between nations, but he also recognized that indiscriminate warfare threatened the world's delicate balance. With that, the meeting came to an end. Once Emperor Valhalla departed, Chris turned to address Edwin Hector directly. King Hector, I understand the motivations behind your recent actions. But make no mistake, His Majesty Emperor Roman Dmitri does not wish to involve himself in every affair. He wants individuals and nations to maintain their autonomy. Therefore, even if this incident had escalated into war, he would likely have allowed the conflict to remain solely between two nations. However, His Majesty's reign is built upon an unwavering conviction. Confident in Dmitri's ability to manage any crisis, even one escalating to the extremes of war, he's willing to refrain from intervening in the affairs of other nations so long as Dmitri's laws are not violated. You would be wise never to test that resolve. However bright Hector's future might seem, remember it can only flourish under the overarching sovereignty of Dmitri. It was an obvious warning. Edwin Hector had been towing a precarious line. His opportunistic manipulation of the situation clearly displeased Chris. King Edwin offered a smile. Hector harbors no intention of defying Dimitri's will. This world is Dimitri's to govern, and I, too, have pledged my loyalty to His Majesty Emperor Roman. This recent incident was merely part of the ongoing contest to determine who will be Dimitri's right hand. We are all simply striving for favor, hoping to secure a place at His Majesty's side. Please, do not misinterpret our motives. Indeed, the world had changed. With the decline of Kronos and Valhalla, humanity had entered a new era. The two former empires were struggling to maintain their standing while ambitious nations like Hector were eyeing their positions. Dynamics were shifting. Edwin Hector openly voiced his ambitions, yet carefully emphasized his unwavering loyalty to Dimitri. Both now and always, my devotion to His Majesty Emperor Roman trumps all else. Of this, Chris was certain. Under Edwin Hector's leadership, Hector was destined for a remarkable resurgence. Much like the recent clash between Hector and Valhalla, incidents both large and small continued to cause ripples around the world. Though the great evils that once threatened life itself were gone, human existence was far from constantly peaceful. In a quiet village nestled in the heart of Arcadia, one man's voice carried through the streets. "Ugh, tell me about it. Things are really tense over in Salamander lately. Hector and Valhalla keep butting heads over everything, and I heard Hector actually crossed Valhalla's borders this time. Luckily, Dimitri stepped in and calmed things down, but merchants coming over from Salamander say Hector and Valhalla are definitely going to go to war sooner or later. You don't think it'll blow up into a continental war like before, do you? Even Arcadia wouldn't be safe if that happened. Who knows? It just might." A palpable anxiety spread among the listeners. They had enjoyed 3 years of relative peace, had grown accustomed to the tranquility that came with it. Now, the mere mention of war unsettled them. Just then, a woman watching over some children nearby interjected. "I don't believe it will come to that. Lady Isabel." It was Isabel. Having relinquished her titles of queen and saintess, she now lived a quiet life in this unassuming village. This incident is fundamentally different from the continental wars of the past. While the old wars involved powers like Kronos seeking utter annihilation, King Edwin Hector likely escalated this situation intentionally, aiming primarily to demonstrate Hector's strength. Considering the fact that news of the conflict has reached even us, here beyond the endless mountains, it seems Hector achieved its objective without shedding any blood. "So does that mean they never actually intended to go to war?" someone asked. Not quite. Had no one intervened, and had Valhalla reacted with hostility, Hector likely would have committed to war to prove its might. Still, it wouldn't have been anything on the scale of a continental war. It would likely have remained a localized power struggle between the two, with the loser simply losing political influence. So please, try not to worry. As long as His Majesty Emperor Roman reigns, that kind of widespread, horrifying devastation shall not come to pass. Even if a situation were to escalate dangerously, the moment Dimitri chooses to intervene, just as with the Demon King, any problem would surely be solved. "Ah, I see. Just what we'd expect from Lady Isabel." The villagers were visibly impressed. Isabel truly possessed a unique insight. Even here, so far removed from the continent of Salamander, she could grasp the world's political currents without needing reports or special intelligence. Isabel smiled warmly. "Well, I must be going now." As she walked away, holding a small child's hand, the villagers murmured excitedly amongst themselves, agreeing she was far too remarkable for such a quiet village like theirs. 3 years prior, Isabel relinquished everything, gathered up the surviving family members of those who had lost their lives in the Devildom, and journeyed to Arcadia. There, she formed the community she now called home. Her daily life was serene. She woke early, tidied her modest bedding, and went out to tend the village's crops. Laying eyes on the warm sunlight gracing Arcadia each day stirred up a complex mix of emotions within her. After her morning chores were complete, she would walk through the village, checking in on the residents and offering help where needed. "Is the leg you injured healing properly? Leaving it alone could lead to complications down the line. Let me take a look. I've already arranged for supplies." The merchant caravan is due by tomorrow afternoon, so we'll be well stocked. If you need anything before then, I can share some of mine. Let me help you with that. Oh? What happened? Every villager greeted Isabel with a warm smile. Her willingness to listen and lend a hand had earned her the deep affection of her community. One afternoon, a young boy, clearly missing his father, clung to his mother and asked what the man had been like. It was a painful question. The boy's father had been one of the loyal soldiers who followed Isabel into the Devil Dome. Noticing the mother's struggle to reply, Isabel gently took the boy into her arms, stroking his hair. Your father was a very brave man. Evil monsters were threatening the world, and he helped defeat them all so that we could live happily ever after. So, you have every right to live with pride. Later, when you grow up and go out into the world, if you tell people what your father did, everyone will know how amazing he was. I sincerely respect people like him. Without brave souls like your father, this village and I wouldn't be here. Really? The boy asked, eyes wide. Yes. Have I ever lied to you? Her smile was radiant. Having shed the burdens of her old titles, Isabel now dedicated her life to these people. Just as Leo and her soldiers had placed their faith and lives in her hands, she now vowed to dedicate her own life to the well-being of their families until her final days. Occasionally, someone would ask if she, once so highly revered, was truly satisfied with this humble existence. Though some might doubt her sincerity, Isabel could answer yes with complete certainty. If you say so, I believe you, the boy declared. I want to grow up to be brave like my dad. At the sight of the boy's smile, Isabel felt a profound sense of happiness. In this world safeguarded by Dmitri, simply existing as an ordinary person, free from the weight of crowns and expectations, brought Isabel genuine fulfillment. Time continued its relentless march forward. Several months passed, and news from the bustling continent of Salamander continued to filter into their secluded village. The world remained turbulent, but with Dmitri acting as a stabilizing anchor, nothing catastrophic happened. Leo, if only you could have seen this world. Thoughts of Leo surfaced from time to time. Her loyal knight, who had followed her into the very depths of the Devil Dome, had always spoken of yearning for a simple, mundane life. An impossible dream back then, yet now, somehow, it was reality. This piece was entirely Roman Dimitri's doing. One would expect a man born with such overwhelming power to use it to dominate and oppress others for personal gain. Yet, the moment the evil threatening the world vanished, Roman Dmitri seemed to deliberately fade from the public eye, his name becoming less prominent in daily life. It was perplexing. Back when the world had been in chaos, his name was the one on everyone's lips. Now, the common folk had little idea what their emperor was up to or where he was at any given moment. For over 3 years, Roman Dmitri had withdrawn from global politics. While many couldn't comprehend their emperor's elusive behavior, Isabel believed she understood his motivations. He must be trying to delay the rifts for as long as possible. In defeating the Demon King, Roman Dmitri himself had become the very source of the rifts plaguing their plane. The more influence he had on this world, the more severe the rifts would become. By minimizing his presence, he was deliberately slowing their catastrophic progression. A part of Isabel still struggled to wrap her head around it. Why perform such an act of sacrifice? Why would someone with so much power conceal the truth and bear such a burden for the sake of others? One thing was certain, this path had not been forced upon him. Roman Dmitri had chosen this burden freely, and he was not the kind of man to harbor regrets. He had reached the summit, the highest seat in the world. In the minds of the unknowing populace, he would forever remain their undefeated, all-powerful emperor. I pray you find your own happiness, just like I have. One day, she hoped to speak with him again, to understand. Shaking off her musings, Isabel made her way toward the small village shrine. Though no longer the official saintess, she had never ceased her private communion with the divine or her daily prayers. Today, she felt compelled to offer them specifically for Roman Dmitri. But as she knelt down, a sudden, overwhelming wave of divine energy crashed over her, causing her eyes to fly open. It was an intensely familiar sensation, She had experienced this divine presence before, had heard God's voice carried on this very power. Just as she anticipated, a heavenly voice echoed through her mind. And when God was finished speaking, a tremor ran through her, right down to her wide, shaken eyes. Ah! The day had arrived. The very day God had spoken of years ago, one that part of her had prayed would never come. At that precise moment, miles and miles away, Roman Dmitri walked out of the imperial palace. His departure was unofficial, unannounced, and known only to him.